Hey, warrior goddesses. This is HeatherAsh Amara, your warrior goddess mama. I'm the author of Warrior Goddess Training, and once a week or so, I do ask Heather Ash to answer any questions that you might have. So we'll just wait a minute or so for some folks to come on. Welcome, Cynthia. And I have a couple great questions to share answers to. And again, you're welcome at any time to share your questions. Even if you're listening to the recording of this broadcast and you were not able to ask a question live, feel free to post a question on this post, and I'll do my best to answer it next week. So the first question that we had for this week is from a woman who is doing ceremony and being initiated into a shamanic tradition right now, and said that she has a phobia of snakes, and that she's finding that in her visions and in her dreams, snakes are coming to her all the time. What does it mean is her question. So welcome, Suzanne. So for what I'm going to give a broad answer and then a more general answer. So what I've noticed for most humans is that we have a tendency to either be terrified of snakes or terrified of spiders. And that those two things have become huge phobias for many people. And that the phobia, it's really interesting because, you know, partially it's around the dream that we're in, because a lot of different more earth-based spiritual traditions, like the spider is super important. And so there are not spider phobias, because the spider is seen as the grandmother and about weaving the web. And it's a really powerful symbol for people. And same thing for the snake, like in shamanic traditions and different earth-based spirituality, the snake energy is really powerful. It's about initiation. It's about shedding the old skin. It's about transformation. But for us Westerners, we tend to have these intense phobias around things that are mysterious or that we don't understand, or that are deemed as evil, basically, or deemed as not good. So probably most of us have either a spider or a snake phobia. So what's fascinating to me about this is that I believe it's a cultural thing. The fear is from the way that humans are dreaming. Is it good to be cautious around snakes and spiders? It's good to be cautious, but they're not out to get you. Really, they're not out to get you. They would much rather avoid you. Hey, Rita. So what's fascinating about a snake phobia is that I read this great psychologist who's working with people that had serious phobias, and who's specifically working with people that had snake phobias. And what he did is he would spend 2 hours with the client. The first hour, they would just talk about the phobia, and he'd talk about snakes. And then towards the end of the first hour, he would introduce to them, say, there's a snake in the other room. And the people would freak out, and he would breathe with them and calm them down. He'd say, now we're going to open the door. And they'd open the door, and the person would be on the other side of the door with the snake. People would freak out. He'd walk them through, calm them down, let them know they were safe. And eventually, by the end of the session, he would have them touch the spider. So he'd have them get close enough to actually handle, the snake, not the spider, the snake in this case. And for almost 100% of the people, that was the end of their snake phobia. It was gone. They just needed to get the reality that there's nothing wrong with snakes. They're not out to get you. And having that actual connection with the snake is what broke the phobia. So that's one way to do it. So if you have a friend that has a snake and can actually be with you and really gently, so you don't want to push. Whenever you have a phobia with something, you don't want to push and you don't want to re-traumatize yourself, but to really gently start to introduce the snake, if you've got a friend that has a snake, and bring it closer until you're able to touch it and connect with it. So as I was saying before, the question was around somebody that has a really big snake phobia, and snakes keep showing up in their visions and their dreams. Snakes are a really powerful messenger around transformation and initiation. And thank you so much, Elle. So it's true, that study was in this blog that I wrote about snake scared lessons. It was about my snake, actually, because I have a ball python. So go ahead, Rita, and read that, because that might help you as well. And just know that the snake medicine is really powerful medicine. It's about transformation. It's about change. And to do your best to separate out probably what's a learned phobia around snakes with what is the shamanic meaning of snakes, which is really good, really beneficial. And snakes are our allies in so many ways. So, you know, for those of you out there that have snake or spider phobias or any kind of phobia, that it's something that can be worked with. It's about really learning to be with your fear. And that's something that as warrior goddesses, we get to navigate through. It's not about not having fear. It's about being willing to notice what the fears are and then really get clear. Is this a mental fear or a physical fear? Mental fear is you've been told or you've learned that something's scary, or you have a story from an experience that's something scary, and then that projects onto everything. Okay. And a physical fear is you're in front of the rattlesnake and it's rattling. That's when you should be afraid. Okay. That's an appropriate time to be afraid, because what the fear does is gives you the adrenaline to jump back, to take action quickly. All right. But the mental fear isn't serving us, but it can take a while to unravel it. I had a great experience when I was hiking a long time ago. I was hiking and at one point I'm walking, I wasn't really paying that much attention, but all of a sudden I was leaping backwards, and I was in the air and jumping backwards. I heard the rattle. There's a rattlesnake in my path that I got too close to. And what was fascinating for me about this situation is that my body reacted before my mind understood what was happening. I didn't hear the rattle until I was already jumping backwards. So that's how amazing your body is at protecting you, is if it knows there's something that is actually dangerous. Like in this case, stepping on a rattlesnake is not a good thing. My body reacted to it. And I didn't have fear even. I mean, I had adrenaline for sure, but once I landed and I knew I was safe and the snake moved away, I was like, wow, that was cool. My body knew what to do. And that's what we're really learning how to do as warrior goddesses, is to clear out enough of the stories in our mind so that our intuition and that our instinct are very well honed. So what your intuition, hi Suski or Saski from Austin, hey Caro, and Hallie and Tara and Kimberly, hey sweethearts, hey Valerie, hey Audra, hi Elle. So your instinct is about your body knowing. I think of your instinct as belly. It's your belly reading the environment and the field, and when you have that belly sense of danger, okay, which is different than your mind saying danger. So I'm very connected because I travel by myself. I travel in my Airstream much of the time. I'm a single woman traveling. And so there's times when, like, I park at rest areas, or I go to a gas station where I'm really listening to my belly. Does this feel safe? I'm not thinking about it. I'm not even looking so much at my environment, because that's not as helpful, because there's all sorts of, thoughts that we have based on visual input that's not necessarily true. I'm asking my instinct, does this feel safe? And I've learned to really trust it. And if it doesn't feel safe, I'll leave. Okay. Then there's also intuition, which I think of more. Intuition is more third eye. It's your connection to spirit. It's your connection to the invisible realms. And that we get intuitive messages in different ways. So that intuitive message might come as a knowing in your body of whatever, like a knowing that, I've had this intuitive hits, I'm going to move to a different place. And I've had no logical understanding of it. I just all of a sudden I'm like, I'm going to be moving. Okay. And intuition also will help guide us. Is that connection to spirit, that connection to our higher self will really guide us to know what our next actions are, to know where to put our energy and where not to put our energy, to be clear on the decisions that we're making. So we want to clean up everything that's in between our intuition and our body instinct. Those are two really important parts of ourselves. Okay. Any other questions? Or I've got one other one that I'll share if nobody here has a specific question. And again, if you're listening to this recording later and you have a question that comes up, please feel free to email us at hello@heatherashamara.com. And I'm happy to answer any question next week. And you can also write a question on this post as well, and I'll check it back in it. Oh, good. I'm so glad I'm going to see you this weekend. That's great. So this weekend, August 3rd, I will be in Austin at the Unity of the Hills doing a talk with my dear friend Don Miguel Ruiz Jr. So I'm really excited about that. We're doing a talk on the art of relationship. And that's a lead into the next question, which is around relationships and about how do we stay in integrity with ourselves when we need to have a difficult conversation with somebody else. Okay, so this question came in a couple days ago, actually when I was doing a workshop recently with a group of warrior goddesses. And one of the things that came up was this idea of, as we start changing, that sometimes the people that are closest to us don't want us to change. And we had a couple people in the workshop that brought this up of like, how do I navigate this? And my response to them was around, keep doing your own work and don't expect other people that are close to you to necessarily like it. That people get really familiar with people being a certain way. And when we start to change, people can feel close to us, can feel threatened. There's a threat, the feeling like they're going to abandon us, or we're going to grow apart, or I don't understand them, or all sorts of things that can get stirred up by people. And so it's not about changing or fixing anybody else. It's about really respecting yourself and how you're changing, and respecting them with where they're at. So often in relationships, what we get into is power struggles with each other. We get into this sense of trying to figure out who's right and who's wrong and trying to control each other. And that's kind of the hallmark of most intimate relationships, is a sense of control, of trying to make the other person be or do who we want them to be. So there's a couple great questions, and I'll go back to this one. Jill, I read somewhere that what elevates a fear to a phobia is that phobia, you project magical qualities on the item or thing you have a phobia of. Yeah, like it's going to leap across canyons to get you. That's interesting. Rachel, how do you work with forgiveness around trauma wounds? Beautiful. I'll answer that one, Rachel, for sure. And Cynthia, thank you. Although I do not have a phobia about snakes, but they kind of give me the heebie-jeebies. Hi, Ilana, welcome. So in relationships, we want to be really mindful. Is there a power struggle happening? And how do we step out of our part of the power struggle? Because if both people are trying to gain power, to gain a sense of control, to gain a sense of safety, nothing's going to happen. Nothing's going to be able to move. If one person is able to let go and stop trying to be right, stop trying to get the other person to understand them, stop trying to prove their point, and step back and listen to what the other person is saying, doesn't mean you're going to agree with them, but that you're not fighting against them. You're just simply, tell me your point of view. What's going on for you? And that ends the power struggle. So you might not agree with them. You still may be at odds with what your own moral code is, or what your experience was, or what your beliefs are. But now you're able to listen to the person, which is going to create an opening and a possibility for healing that's not there when both people are trying to be right and hold control. Okay, so that's a really important piece. So question from Rachel, how do you work with forgiveness, hey Lisa, around trauma and wounds? First, you don't want to try and rush or push or force the forgiveness. So sometimes we try to get ahead of ourselves, I'll put it that way, and to tell ourselves, I should forgive. I should be forgiving. What's wrong with me that I'm not forgiving? Okay, so have that in your intent that you do eventually want to forgive, and that's what you're moving towards, and be with where you're in the process. So if you're not ready to forgive yet, wait. Forgiveness takes a particular amount of energy and a particular type of ripeness and healing around the trauma. So the first place you want to work on the forgiveness is look at, is there any place you need to forgive yourself? So often what keeps the trauma and the shame, the trauma locked in, is shame and blame. Okay. So we have the trauma and then we're ashamed of the trauma, or we're blaming somebody else for us having the trauma. And to begin to move towards healing means having the willingness to forgive ourselves and to bring the shame up so we can clear it. So trauma will fester if we're like, I can't tell anybody this, I can't let anybody know, and we're trying to hide it. Versus if we can find somebody that is kind and compassionate and can simply listen and be with us, that will really help with the healing process, because it helps dissolve the shame. If somebody can hear your story and they're present with you and loving with you, then when you bring the story into the light, the shame can't survive. It just starts to dissipate. Okay, so you want to check that. You also want to check, are you blaming? Are you blaming yourself? Or are you blaming others? Is there judgment that's woven in? So that's the other thing that we want to really clean up, is the places that we're blaming ourselves for whatever the incident was, or blaming other people. You know, what can be really helpful is just starting to tell yourself that whatever it is happened, period. There's no other story. So don't try and figure out who was right, who was wrong, whose fault is it, what did I do wrong? It's just simply this happened. And we were also talking about this, the Warrior Goddess weekend, is that there were several women that had had trauma, and they said that it made it worse when they would share the trauma with someone and the person would go, oh, well, what did you do to create that? Or, oh, just get over it. And they were acting as if the person did something wrong in order for the trauma to happen. So that place of the place that we blame ourselves, or the place that we blame others, like it's somebody else's fault or it's our fault, that needs to get cleared up. As the shame and the blame get cleaned up, as the judgment, the self-judgment, you'll have more spaciousness to then look towards forgiving yourself. Forgiving yourself for the ways you've used the experience against yourself. Because whatever the trauma, it may have happened once or it may have happened repeatedly, and it's not happening now. So anytime that you repeat the trauma in your mind and re-trigger yourself, that's you using it against yourself. Okay, so there's this learning of how to not re-traumatize yourself. And that also then allows you to work directly with the healing. What does your body need to heal? Not what does your mind think your body needs to heal. Trauma is about healing the body, and also forgiving your body for the way it reacts to things. Being gentle, staying with yourself through the process. Okay, rather than thinking, I shouldn't be reacting anymore, you know, I've done all this work, or why am I still getting triggered? That's mind. What you want to do is come back into, hi body, hi sweetheart, what do you need to heal? How do we help unwind this out of the nervous system? How do I forgive myself for any piece that I'm holding, either the ways I've used this incident against myself, or the ways that I'm blaming myself for it happening in the first place. So I hope that helps, Rachel. All right. Julia, you're so welcome for the Warrior Goddess books. Elle just shared another blog. Thank you, Elle, of difficult communication in relationships. That's another great blog. Lisa, you're so right. I always heard that forgiveness is for us, not the other person. Yeah, because you're letting go of your attachment to the other person, really. When you're not forgiving somebody else, they're still in your field. It's like a thorn or a splinter that keeps poking you. And we really want to pull the splinter out. Yeah, Julia, triggers are the worst. Yeah, and so you get to learn what triggers the trauma and then how to navigate that. And there's going to be ways, some ways that there's no helping. Something's going to happen and it's going to trigger you. But you can also start to look at, how do I create more safety around myself so that there's less triggering happening? Because as you heal, as you gain more energy, then the triggers won't be as intense. But especially in the beginning, there's a lot of different things that you can trigger you. So just be gentle with yourself, sweetheart. All right, well, that is our time for this July 29th version of Ask Heather Ash. If you have any more questions, please feel free to email us at hello@HeatherAshAmara.com. And Al, if you can share that email, that'd be great. And welcome to Dawn and Marianne. Hey, and Leanne. So glad you could join. So again, anybody that joined and is watching the video later, feel free to email us hello@HeatherAshAmara.com. And I will be broadcasting again next week. So take good care, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. So here's that email address. Good. Oh, and Elle shared it too. Yay. You're so welcome. Thanks, Elle. I so appreciate you coming on and sharing those 2 blog posts. That's awesome. All right, everyone, take good care. I'll talk to you next week, if not before, and hope to see all of you really, really soon. Next event I'm doing is in Austin, August 3rd at the Unity of the Hills. I'm doing a talk on the art of love with my dear friend Don Miguel Ruiz Jr. All right, sweeties. Bye-bye.